Hey everybody, Shawn Tubbs here. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the REVV Amps D20. Really great sounding 20-watt amplifier, all tube driven. It's going to go clean to crunch, but it also takes pedals incredibly well. It's loaded with really cool features. One thing that's really nice about it is it weighs 9 pounds. Actually, it feels lighter to me, but the specs say 9 pounds, which is remarkable. Another thing that's really remarkable is it comes with the Two Notes Torpedo embedded reactive load and cab IRs. That's so cool. So you can, via the remote software, you can go and manipulate your IRs to whatever you want, and then you can store up to 6 different IR presets in the amplifier itself and just choose via this switch right here. So that's a really cool feature that we'll get into. Now, I can't go totally in depth on this because they're still tweaking the software in as we speak. By the time you get one of these in your hands, you'll be able to tweak away on it and it'll be awesome. But I am going to go through just the preset sounds that came with the amp because they sound really good. So we'll get to that for sure. So on the front panel, here's what you've got. You've got gain, treble, middle, bass, and volume, which is essentially your master volume. So that's a pretty straight ahead setup. You've got 2 switches next to that. The switch on the left, that button, is going to allow you to switch from 20 watts, which is a pretty stout 20 watts, down to a really nice 4-watt setting. So if you want to get down to those bedroom levels and be able to practice, you can, especially if you don't want to use headphones. Right next to that is a button that applies more to the virtual cabinets, and it's basically going to allow you to choose whether or not you want the power section to go into the virtual cab or the embedded reactive load, or just the preamp. Now in my case, I prefer to have the power amp hit it, but if for some reason you wanted to just have the preamp into the reactive load, that's what that button does. Right next to that is a 1/4-inch jack for your headphone out, which is awesome. And right below that is the volume level for the headphones. Right next to that is what I mentioned. It's your virtual cabinet selection. You can select up to 6 different presets that you can store, but it is going to come with some factory presets that you can check out as well. And then of course you've got your standby and your on and off. On the back of the amplifier, the first thing you're going to notice is there's a MIDI in. So yes, this is MIDI controllable. Right next to that, you've got bias test points, which is so cool. Right above that, you've got your USB out, so that's what you're going to use to connect with the Torpedo remote software. Next to that is your ground lift, so if you're experiencing some hums, you can switch that in and out and make it go away. Right next to that is your balanced XLR out, which is awesome. It's actually an XLR out. Dig that. Right next to that is your effects loop, and that is a buffered series effects loop, and it sounds fabulous. Right next to that is your speaker output, and right next to that is a button that's going to allow you to choose either 8 ohm or 4 ohm loads. And then the last switch on the back of the amp is allowing you to choose whether or not you're going to use the internal reactive load on the amplifier, or you're going to use your speaker as the load on the amp. So obviously if you're going to run headphones with this or just run it straight into your DAW, you would go ahead and push that switch in and it would just be the internal reactive load, and you'd be off to the races. So yeah, without further ado, let's check out this awesome 6v6 powered 20-watt D20 by REVV. Okay, let's check out the REVV D20. The way we're listening to it right now is mic'd up. I'm using my Bogner 2x12. It's a closed-back cabinet. It's loaded with Celestion V30s. And I'm going to use my usual mic combination, which is a Shure SM57 and a Royer 121. So we'll start there, and then we'll jump over to the embedded sounds in the amp. Now, as I mentioned before, I can't manipulate those via the software. By the time you get this amp in your hands, you certainly can, but I do want you to hear the presets that are currently in the amp. They sound great. So the first thing I'm going to do, or where I like to start, especially with amps that I've never tried before, is I always put everything at noon and just see what it sounds like. And in this case, it sounds really sweet. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to just sweep the bass, mid, and treb controls for you. That was the mid, here's the bass. So it's a really nice sounding tone stack. I think what I'll do is add a little bit of top end, add a little more treble. That sounds sweet. Maybe back the mids just a little. And then add some low end. That's a pretty nice start. Now let's check out the gain really quick. We can get this really clean, especially if you're going to hit it with pedals and you don't want any breakup at all. And even at around noon, it's still pretty clean. It'll break up a little bit if you hit it with a rear humbucker. But it's still pretty clean. Now, if you do want some crunch, you can pull out the gain control. That potentiometer is a push-pull. When you pull that out, you're going to get more crunch. And that sounds really killer, especially on a session. If you didn't have any pedals at all, you'd still be in good shape for that overdub, like crunch part. Sounds really good, but I'm going to go ahead and put that back in, because speaking of pedals, let's just turn a few on, because this is an excellent pedal platform amp. So I'm just going to use the pedals that were on my board at the time I actually recorded that performance song. So for instance, I'll turn on this Rocket Pedals Blue Notes. It's a low gain kind of blues drive pedal. Or we could go with even higher gain overdrive. Let me turn on this GTO pedal by Rocket Pedals. That sounds really cool. Maybe add a little bit of treble. That sounds great. What about a fuzz pedal? That sounds really good. So it takes pedals really well. I didn't find a pedal that didn't work with it. Everything sounded great. So that's that sound. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over just real quick, and let's listen to the embedded sounds on the Revv. Now we're talking about the embedded torpedo sounds on the Revv. So this is the first preset. Sounds really cool. Sounds like maybe it's a 4x12 cab. There's some reverb on it. That sounds killer. What's the other preset? Here's preset 2. Sounds like maybe that's a smaller cabinet with less room, or less actual reverb, but you're hearing some room in there. That sounds great. Let me turn on an overdrive. So these are just the embedded sounds. Now imagine how great those sound, but you can still tweak. You can pick anything you want from the software and put it into these presets. So once again, this sounds great, but imagine the possibilities of being able to tweak in your sound. So this is the third one. Let me see how it sounds. That's really cool sounding, kind of roomy. Maybe that sounds like maybe almost a 1x12 open back. I honestly don't know. But that sounds really great. Let's try preset number 4. See what that is. Little bigger sounding cab, less room. That'd probably sound great with some crunch on it. Oh yeah, that's huge. Let's go to the next cabinet, preset 5. That sounds great. What's preset 6? That sounds more like a big 4x12, but a lot of room. Pretty thumpy in the low end, but you get the idea. These presets sound really, really good. Now, one thing I need to point out while I'm doing this is you can bypass the power section to the embedded torpedo. So if you just wanted to hear the preamp section, you just hit this pre-post button. So if we move it to post, now we're not hearing the power section, just the preamp into the embedded load box. I mean, I personally, if you're going to use a reactive load with IRs that sounds so good, one of the main reasons is because you get to hear the power section of your amp into that reactive load. But if you needed to just hear the preamp section, you could totally do that. Now, the other thing I didn't point out, and let me just do it really quick. I'm going to switch back over. And now we're back to the mics. Let me turn on a box. We're back on the mics. The reason we went back to the mics is I want to be able to show you the 4-watt setting. Still sounds great, but it's 4 watts, so that's like whisper volumes. If you just wanted to turn on your amp really quick into your cabinet and go, and you didn't want to put on headphones or anything. It's at a really reasonable level. I'll put it back to the 20-watt setting. Really great. And in the 20-watt setting, that's a pretty stout amplifier that you could use on small stages and clubs and what have you. I think it's plenty loud for that. So that is the Revv D20. If you've got any further questions about it, go to the Revv website and check it out. And as always, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you enjoy what you're seeing, please subscribe. Hit that like button. If you do subscribe, be sure to hit the bell button so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Thanks, guys.